2 weeks ago, 3 weeks, or let me take that back. Ready? 3, 2. 3 weeks ago, Pennsylvania's Supreme Court ruled that the Commonwealth's current congressional districts were unconstitutional, saying they were unfairly drawn in favor of Republicans. Now, new maps were submitted Friday, and today those two are being called into question. Joining us now on the Fox 43 Capitol Beat to talk about what is next in this quest to draw new congressional maps is Lancaster County State Representative Bryan Cutler. Thanks for joining us this morning. The Supreme Court said that the whole General Assembly had to be involved in doing these new maps, but it was only Senator Scarnati and it was only Speaker Turzai. So why weren't you and others involved?
Well, when you look at what happened, the court issued an opinion, which was within their constitutional purview, and said that the maps were unconstitutional, therefore they wanted them redrawn. They gave us 18 days to comply, and late on the evening of day 16, they actually issued the opinion. So in order to submit something and comply with the order, the maps were roughly drawn and submitted, but I do understand the concerns and agree that they still need to go through the constitutional process, which would be open, transparent, and the opportunity for amendment.
So you still want to be involved? Do you think Republicans, Democrats, both sides of the General Assembly should be involved kind of moving forward, even though we're kind of reaching some deadlines here?
Well, let's be honest. I mean, the deadline that the court imposed on us is artificial in terms of being able to comply. The shortest that they've ever been able to constitutionally comply and draw maps previously was 9 days. That was the last time that the maps and the lines were called into question. But even during that process, the mechanics of the process required that they go back and redraw them. When you look at that, that's a compressed time frame. Constitution requires us to have 3 days in the House, 3 days in the Senate. By rule, our 3 days actually turns into 4 because we have a 24-hour waiting period for amendments. So at a minimum, we would need 7 days in order to comply. And the 2 days that they gave us between the issuing of the opinion and ultimately the final day of the order was simply impossible.
But to your point, there were 18 days that there could have at least been discussions to kind of figure out if we're going to draw these maps, as Senator Scarnati and Speaker Turzai did, then couldn't there have at least been discussions, at the very least, with Democratic leaders instead of making it Republican-sided?
Well, there were discussions with both Democratic leaders as well as the governor. There were a series of meetings. Unfortunately, the components that the court was using to judge the maps, they did not issue until day 16. In fact, when you look at the order as written, there is some question as to whether or not it actually conflicts with the Federal Voting Rights Act. They say to take the areas such as municipalities and counties, this map would comply with that. When you take that into consideration, they really spent a lot of time talking on their 100-page opinion. In my opinion, if it takes 100 pages to explain your position, you probably took the wrong one. But when you look at the mechanics that they actually ultimately outlined in the opinion, that degree of specificity and detail simply wasn't available until late on the day.
In your opinion, are there new congressional maps for primaries in May?
Well, I really don't understand how that timeline could actually work given the constitutional constraints, to your point, with the legislature being involved, the governor being involved, and then ultimately being reevaluated by the court. These maps stood up previously through 3 election cycles. It seems somewhat odd that they've eventually got challenged now. And look, I'm saying this as somebody who wasn't in favor of the old maps. You can go back on my website and see a press release where I complained about the 7th District and how it snaked its way into Lancaster County. So that's coming from me as someone who wasn't in favor of it. Ultimately, I understand the court's position, the desire to draw new lines, but I actually agree with Justice Baer and that I think that the remedy actually borders on being unconstitutional.
Let's talk budget here. The budget came out last week. It's the governor's 4th budget, and this is also the 4th time that he's asked for a severance tax. It's the 4th time he's asked for a minimum wage hike, and those seem to be the 2 things that Republicans have drawn a proverbial line in the sand on. Why is that? Why those 2 things, and can there be progress in moving towards a severance tax or a minimum wage hike?
Look, I think when you look at what the governor's proposed in terms of both the severance tax as well as the minimum wage, that's certainly something that his supporters and he himself, because of the meetings I've had with him related to the budget, I know that he personally believes in both of those. I think that when you open up the broader discussion, there was a lengthy discussion on severance tax throughout this cycle so far. Part of that was regulatory reform that was notably absent in his budgetary comments. I think the two probably, if they advance at all, would have to advance together in terms of streamlining the process. The average wait time for DEP permits here in the Commonwealth is actually close to 2 years in our region here in South Central PA. So that's whether or not you're running a pipeline, whether you're building a new dairy barn expansion or a chicken house or even a home. And when you get into things like that, that significantly slows construction and slows the economy. The minimum wage, I think it's always better to focus on family sustaining jobs, like a lot of the career technical things. That's an area where I think we can agree with the governor on. And quite frankly, we've seen a lot of movement with the federal tax plan already, where different institutions have already increased their wages, and I think that will continue going forward.
It's an election year, not just for the governor, but you and all of your colleagues in the House and many people in the Senate as well. How important is it to get a budget done on time and signed? Obviously, it's important for the governor. Equally, how important is it for Republican incumbents?
Look, in each of the last 3 years, we've submitted budgets to the governor. He has yet to sign one. I think it would be important for him to sign this one, and I actually think it'll be done early this year.
All right, Representative Bryan Cutler from Lancaster County joining us on the Fox 43 Capitol Beat, talking maps and budget. We could talk all day. We have to cut it here. Fox 43 News will be right back.